What happens when a luxury store manager's prejudice meets the billionaire who owns her company? Patricia Wells was about to find out. Marcus Johnson walked into Meridian Fine Jewelry wearing the same casual clothes he preferred for his weekend shopping trips. Jeans, sneakers, and a simple hoodie that had cost him To Patricia, he looked like someone who didn't belong in her high-end Beverly Hills boutique. Her aggressive treatment of the inappropriate customer was about to collide with the shocking truth. Marcus Johnson was the tech billionaire who had purchased her entire retail empire. By the time this encounter was over, Patricia would be unemployed. Marcus would own one more lesson in humility, and the luxury retail world would have a new story about the dangers of judging customers by their appearance. Meridian Fine Jewelry occupied prime real estate on Rodeo Drive, its floor-to-ceiling windows displaying collections that most people could only dream of owning. The boutique's interior was a study in understated luxury. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and display cases filled with pieces that carried price tags in the six-figure range. It was the kind of establishment where appointments were preferred, credit checks were routine, and the staff prided themselves on serving only the most exclusive clientele. Patricia Wells had been the store manager for 8 years, and in that time she had cultivated what she considered an expert ability to assess customers within moments of their entry. The way they dressed, how they carried themselves, the confidence or hesitation in their movements, all told her whether someone was a serious buyer or merely a curious browser who would waste her time and potentially make her legitimate customers uncomfortable. At 45, Patricia had built her career on understanding luxury retail's unspoken rules. The wealthy didn't announce themselves with loud displays of money. They demonstrated it through subtle signals that she had learned to read. The quality of their shoes, the understated elegance of their accessories, the casual way they discussed price tags that would make ordinary people gasp. These were the markers of true affluence, which is why Marcus Johnson's presence in her store immediately set off every alarm in her carefully calibrated system. Marcus had walked in during the busy Saturday afternoon rush, moving with the quiet confidence of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. At 38, he was tall and athletic, with the kind of calm presence that came from years of high-stakes decision-making. His dark skin was unmarked by stress lines, his movements economical and purposeful. But what caught Patricia's attention wasn't his demeanor, it was his clothes. Faded blue jeans that had clearly seen better days, white sneakers that looked like they'd come from a discount store, and a gray hoodie with a small hole near the left pocket. No watch, no jewelry, no designer accessories. To Patricia's trained eye, he looked exactly like the kind of person who wandered into luxury stores to gawk at things they couldn't afford, taking photos to show friends, and generally creating an atmosphere that made real customers uncomfortable. Marcus was actually there for a very specific reason, though Patricia couldn't have guessed it. 6 months earlier, his tech company, Johnson Digital Solutions, had completed a quiet acquisition of Meridian Luxury Retail Group, a chain that included this Beverly Hills flagship store, along with 12 other high-end boutiques across California. The purchase had been handled through lawyers and investment firms, keeping Marcus's name out of the public transactions. Even the store managers hadn't been told who their new owner was. Today, Marcus was conducting what he liked to call ground truth visits, unannounced trips to his properties to see how they operated when they thought no one important was watching. He'd done the same thing with his other companies, often revealing inefficiencies, cultural problems, or customer service issues that never made it into formal reports. Marcus had built his fortune by paying attention to details that others missed, and he'd learned that the most important insights often came from the most unexpected places. As he approached the display case containing their signature watch collection, Marcus noticed Patricia watching him with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was preparing for action. He'd seen the look before in other high-end establishments, the calculation behind professional smiles, the quick assessment of threat level, the subtle preparation for intervention. Marcus began examining a Patek Philippe timepiece, noting its craftsmanship and the way the light caught the complications on its face. The piece was priced at $85,000, and he was genuinely interested in its technical specification. Watchmaking was one of his passions, and he appreciated the engineering that went into pieces like this. That's when Patricia made her move. "Excuse me, sir," she said, approaching with the practiced authority of someone who had handled this situation many times before. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus looked up, noting the tone that suggested she was anything but interested in helping. "I'm just looking at this Patek Philippe. Beautiful piece." Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, it is. That particular piece is part of our exclusive collection, and it carries a significant investment commitment." Marcus nodded. 85,000. I can see why. The fact that he knew the price without looking at the tag gave Patricia a moment's pause, but she pressed forward. In her experience, people who couldn't afford luxury items often memorized prices to sound knowledgeable. "Sir, I should mention that we typically work by appointment for viewings of our premium pieces. Perhaps I could schedule something for you later in the week." Marcus understood what she was really saying. He'd heard variations of it before in other establishments, polite phrases that meant "you don't look like you belong here, and I'd prefer if you left." "I appreciate that," Marcus said calmly, "but I'm here now, and I'm interested in seeing the piece." Patricia felt her professional patience beginning to thin. She glanced around the showroom, noting that several other customers were watching the interaction. These were the kind of customers she needed to protect. Well-dressed, obviously affluent, the type who expected a certain atmosphere when they shopped for luxury items. "Sir, I think you might be more comfortable at one of our other locations. This particular boutique specializes in pieces for our most exclusive clientele." Marcus set down the loupe he'd been using to examine the watch's movement and looked directly at Patricia. "And you've determined that I'm not part of that clientele?" "I'm simply trying to ensure that all of our customers have the best possible experience," Patricia replied, her voice carrying the kind of professional authority that she'd used to remove unwanted browsers before. Marcus smiled, but there was something in his expression that Patricia couldn't quite read. "Miss Wells," he said, reading her name tag, "what if I told you I was interested in purchasing that watch?" Patricia's training kicked in. She'd handled this before, people who insisted they could afford things that were clearly beyond their means, sometimes even producing credit cards or cash that would ultimately be declined or prove insufficient. "Sir, that piece requires a 50% deposit, and we need to verify financing before we can proceed with any transaction." "Financing?" Marcus asked, his eyebrows raising slightly. "For purchases of this magnitude, we typically work with our preferred banking partners to arrange appropriate payment structures." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. "I see. You assume I need finance." "I assume," Patricia said, her voice taking on a harder edge, "that someone serious about purchasing an $85,000 watch would have made an appointment and come prepared for that level of transaction." The conversation was attracting more attention now. Other customers had stopped their browsing to watch the exchange, and Patricia's assistant manager, David Chen, was approaching from across the showroom floor. "Is everything all right here?" David asked, his tone suggesting he was prepared to provide backup if needed. "Everything's fine," Patricia said without taking her eyes off Marcus. "This gentleman was just leaving." Marcus looked around the store, taking in the elegant displays, the carefully curated atmosphere, the other customers who were now openly staring. He thought about the acquisition documents he'd signed 6 months ago, the reports he'd received about the store's performance, and the cultural transformation he'd been planning to implement across his retail properties. "Actually," Marcus said quietly, "I think I'll stay a bit longer." Patricia's professional composure began to crack. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist that you leave. This is a private establishment, and we reserve the right to refuse service." "On what grounds?" Marcus asked. Patricia hesitated. She couldn't say what she was really thinking, that his appearance, his race, his casual clothes, all screamed that he didn't belong in her carefully curated environment. Instead, she fell back on the kind of vague justifications she'd used before. "You're creating a disturbance and making our other customers uncomfortable." Marcus looked around again. "I'm standing quietly, examining merchandise. How exactly am I creating a disturbance?" "Sir," David interjected, "perhaps we could discuss this outside." Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his contacts. "Actually, I think I'll make a phone call first." Patricia felt a surge of irritation. "Sir, if you're calling someone to come down here and cause a scene, "I'm calling my lawyer," Marcus said simply. The word sent a chill through Patricia's professional confidence. In 20 years of retail, she'd learned that people who threatened legal action usually fell into two categories: those who were bluffing to get their way, and those who actually had grounds for a lawsuit. Something in Marcus's calm tone suggested he wasn't bluffing. "Your lawyer?" David asked. Marcus nodded, still scrolling through his phone. "Robert Steinberg at Steinberg, Walsh and Associates. He handles discrimination cases." Patricia felt the ground shifting beneath her. "Discrimination? Sir, this has nothing to do with—" "With what?" Marcus asked, looking up from his phone. "My race. My clothes. What exactly have you based your decision to refuse me service on?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia realized that every word of their conversation had been witnessed by a showroom full of customers, some of whom were now recording with their phones. We have policies about appointments for premium viewings. Show me that policy," Marcus said calmly. "In writing." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. There was no such policy. The appointment preference was something she enforced selectively, based on her assessment of customer potential. "Sir," David tried again, "perhaps we can find a compromise here." Marcus held up a hand, still holding his phone. "Actually, before I call my lawyer, let me try someone else." He scrolled to another contact and pressed dial. "Who are you calling now?" Patricia asked, her voice carrying a note of panic. "The owner," Marcus said simply. Patricia blinked. "The owner? Of the store? Of the chain? I think he should know how his employees are treating customers." David and Patricia exchanged glances. The ownership of their company had changed hands 6 months ago, but they'd never met the new owner. All communication came through corporate management and investment representatives. Marcus held the phone to his ear, then seemed to think better of it. "Actually, you know what? I'll handle this directly." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wallet, not a designer piece, just a simple black leather wallet that looked like it had come from a department store. From it, he extracted a business card and handed it to Patricia. She looked down at the card, her eyes scanning the text. "Marcus Johnson, Chief Executive Officer, Johnson Digital Solutions." Below that was a list of corporate titles and board positions that meant nothing to her. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I don't understand what this has to do with—" Marcus pulled out his phone again and opened his email app. He scrolled through recent messages until he found what he was looking for, then handed the phone to Patricia. "Read this," he said quietly. Patricia took the phone and began reading. It was an email thread between Marcus and a corporate law firm, discussing the final details of an acquisition. Her eyes widened as she saw the terms being discussed. The purchase of Meridian Luxury Retail Group for $847 million, with Marcus Johnson listed as the acquiring party. "This can't be," she whispered. "Keep reading," Marcus said. Patricia scrolled down to see property deeds, corporate filings, and legal documents that made it clear Marcus Johnson had purchased her company, her building, and effectively her job 6 months ago. David, reading over her shoulder, felt his face go pale. "Sir? If this is accurate—" "It's accurate," Marcus said, taking his phone back. "Which means, Ms. Wells, that when you asked me to leave my own store, you were essentially telling your boss that he wasn't welcome in his own business." The showroom had gone completely quiet. Other customers were now openly staring, their phones out and recording. Patricia felt as if the marble floor might open up and swallow her. "Mr. Johnson," she stammered, "I had no idea. I mean, no one told us. We weren't informed about the ownership change." Marcus nodded. "I know, that was intentional. I wanted to see how my businesses operated when they thought no one important was watching." He looked around the showroom, taking in the displays, the other customers, the staff members who were now gathering to watch the conversation. "And what I've learned today is very interesting." Patricia felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Mr. Johnson, please, I can explain what—" "Explain what?" Marcus asked, his voice still calm but carrying a new authority. "Explain how you decided I didn't belong in a store I own. Explain how you were willing to refuse service based on your assumptions about who I am and what I can afford." The crowd had grown larger now, and phones were recording from multiple angles. What had started as a routine Saturday afternoon shopping trip was becoming a viral moment that would be shared across social media platforms within hours. Marcus looked at Patricia, then at David, then at the other customers who were watching with fascination. "Wells," he said finally, "I think we need to have a conversation about customer service, about assumptions, and about the kind of culture I want in my stores." Patricia nodded, unable to speak. "But first," Marcus continued, "I think I'll take a closer look at that Patek Philippe. After all, I did come here to shop." The crowd had grown larger now, and phones were recording from multiple angles. What had started as a routine Saturday afternoon was about to become a masterclass in humility, respect, and the dangerous assumptions people make about wealth and worth. Within 24 hours, the incident at Meridian Fine Jewelry would be trending on social media platforms worldwide. The video footage captured by customers would spark conversations about racism in luxury retail, the nature of wealth and appearance, and the importance of treating every customer with dignity regardless of their clothes or color. Marcus Johnson spent the next hour in his own store examining merchandise, talking with customers, and observing the staff's behavior. He purchased 3 watches totaling nearly $200,000, paying with a black American Express card that had no spending limit. Patricia Wells submitted her resignation the following Monday, before Marcus could decide whether to terminate her employment. In her resignation letter, she wrote that the incident had forced her to confront biases she hadn't realized she held, and that she needed time to reflect on how her assumptions had nearly destroyed her career. Marcus accepted her resignation but also offered her something unexpected, a position in his corporate diversity and inclusion program, where she could help train other retail managers to avoid the mistakes she had made. She accepted, understanding that redemption sometimes comes through service to others. The Patek Philippe watch Marcus had originally been examining became part of his personal collection. But more importantly, the incident became part of his company's training program, a real-world example of how unconscious bias can damage both individuals and businesses. Marcus Johnson had built his fortune by understanding that value doesn't always come in expected packages. Technology companies could be run by college dropouts, billion-dollar ideas could emerge from garage startups, and the most important innovations often came from people and places that traditional institutions overlooked. The lesson of that Saturday afternoon in Beverly Hills wasn't just about retail customer service or workplace discrimination. It was about the fundamental truth that success, intelligence, and worth have no uniform. They don't announce themselves with designer labels or luxury accessories. They don't require approval from gatekeepers who think they can judge a person's value by their appearance. Marcus Johnson proved that afternoon that true power doesn't need to intimidate or impress. It simply exists, quiet and confident, until the moment it chooses to reveal itself. And when it does, the revelation can change everything for everyone involved. The Meridian Fine Jewelry incident became a case study taught in business schools across the country, an example of how unconscious bias can cost businesses, customers, reputation, and money. Harvard Business School wrote an entire chapter about the incident in their diversity and inclusion curriculum, using it to illustrate the hidden costs of discrimination in luxury retail. The story spread far beyond social media. Major news networks picked up the footage, turning it into a national conversation about wealth, appearance, and assumptions. Business magazines analyzed Marcus's acquisition strategy and his approach to corporate culture transformation. Retail industry publications used the incident to examine training protocols and customer service standards across luxury establishments. Patricia Wells became an unlikely advocate for change. After accepting Marcus's offer to join his diversity and inclusion program, she traveled across the country speaking to retail managers about unconscious bias. Her presentations always began with the same admission: "I almost destroyed my career because I thought I could judge a person's worth by their clothes." Her story became one of redemption and learning, showing that even deep-seated biases could be overcome through education and genuine commitment to change. Marcus Johnson's approach to the incident surprised many business analysts. Rather than seeking revenge or public humiliation, he chose transformation over destruction. He implemented new training programs across all his retail properties, requiring every employee to complete bias recognition courses. He also established a customer advocacy program, where shoppers who felt discriminated against could report incidents directly to corporate leadership. The changes went beyond training. Marcus redesigned the physical spaces of his stores, removing barriers that might intimidate customers and creating more welcoming environments. He implemented new hiring practices that prioritized emotional intelligence and cultural awareness alongside retail experience. Most importantly, he changed the compensation structure, rewarding employees based on customer satisfaction scores rather than just sales numbers. The impact extended to the broader luxury retail industry. Other companies began examining their own practices, worried about becoming the next viral discrimination scandal. Trade associations developed new standards for customer service training, and several major retailers hired consultants to audit their customer interaction protocol. Marcus's story also inspired a new generation of entrepreneurs, particularly those from underrepresented communities. He began speaking at business schools and entrepreneurship conferences, sharing his journey from a kid who couldn't afford luxury stores to a billionaire who owned them. His message was always the same: success doesn't require permission from people who think they know what wealth looks like. The Patek Philippe watch that started the entire incident remained in Marcus's collection, but it became more than just a timepiece. He often displayed it in his office as a reminder that value exists in many forms: the engineering excellence of the watch, the lesson learned from the encounter, and the positive changes that emerged from a moment of prejudice. But perhaps the most important change Marcus brought to his companies wasn't in their policies or procedures, it was in their culture. He created environments where every customer was treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance, where every employee understood that assumptions could be costly, and where respect was the standard rather than the exception. Marcus Johnson could have destroyed Patricia Wells' career with a word. Instead, he chose to transform it, turning a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Because true wealth isn't just about having money, it's about having the wisdom to use that money, and that power, to make the world a little better than you found it. And sometimes the most important lessons are learned not in boardrooms or lecture halls, but in luxury boutiques on Saturday afternoons, when a billionaire in a $30 hoodie teaches everyone watching that respect should never be a luxury item.